All right, ladies and gentlemen, after a brief hiatus, I'm back in the internet world, ready to produce my first video of 2013. I was actually going to do this a week or so ago, but through dealing with college and taking a hiatus and just enjoying my winter break, I didn't. And this is also my first thing using my new laptop here that I have with the wonderful Windows 8. Not really. But we can talk more about that later and its compatibility issues for certain things. Today what we're going to do, we're going to talk about loop building. Seems to be a question I get asked about a whole bunch privately about making drum loops and or other kinds of loops. But I'm going to use drum loops because pretty much because they're easier, and I'm not the most comfortable person with building synthesizers using like 3x3 oscillators and such like that. I know previously I've discussed this before that I like to use FLStudio for beat creation and making loops just because it's easy. If you are still sticking to Acid alone, and as you can see now, I have Ableton now because I have a Launchpad that I got for Christmas, and I really don't like building loops and things with it either, even though it's a live light. I still need to play with it a little bit more as well. But let's jump right in with FruityLoops. I have made a loop here by importing my own samples in here that I have gotten from some construction kits, courtesy of Music Radar. And little pro tip here: if you have not been to Music Radar's website, even though they have not updated in a long time, they have gigabytes upon gigabytes of free loops. It's one of the many resources I have used to get stuff from before. So what we can do is, like, if you load a blank template in here, you can insert samplers or audio clips or whatever you want to do. And then you can choose to go in here, and then you can load files from wherever you have them saved at. I keep all my stuff that's construction kit based. I don't try to keep them all together for stuff that I basically will use in FLStudio, just for the reasons that I don't like using these things in Acid, and I'm going to show you why. And that's because whenever you build a loop in here, it's just easier, it quantizes better, it just makes everything all around better. It's point and click, and you get the easiest bang for your buck as far as building your drum loop. I'll just go ahead and play this little section of thing that I've made at this tempo. I'm going to talk about something else about here in just a second. Alright, now at 140, I know this says new disco over here. This is just the sample package it came out of. I don't like the sounds of them. At 140, that doesn't sound very much like a housey song. Probably need to do an entire video about the differentiations between tempos and genres, because if we just knock it down 15 beats per minute to 125 and we listen again, you can feel that slower pulse gives you that better housey vibe. I mean, there is progressive house and all the other stuff that bumps up and runs faster tempos, but I generally like working between like 115 to 135. If you're doing one trance and drum and bass, you go 140, 160, 180. I don't even want to talk about dubstep because it can be anywhere from like 60 to 212 or more. It's absolutely ridiculous. Depends on how you build your stuff. Of course, now and then there's also like normal music theory, which is you can use samples that are either half or double the speed of the thing you're originally working with, because at double tempo, your time signature should be roughly equal or so. But that's theory lessons, and I don't really particularly care about doing that stuff. So, but taking this exactly, build it in here where we can just turn these things on and off, which is the easy, fun, clean way to do this. Doing this in Acid, we have to mark out our regions, figure out how much of our, like how far the spacing is for everything, and play it again. I'll have this set to 128 for a reason, 125, and then you can see that building these loops is roughly the same, but it's just not graphically as friendly. Like, you can do this all day long. And there's a grayed out bar. We'll talk about this here in just one second. it's just much more complicated to get this done. Now, there's upon doing this, you can get rid of these for a second. You can take your entire region here, and let's do where's my little tool here? This thing, and we just grab all this stuff and Control C, and back to our pencil here. Move our insertion point, Control V, and there we go. We've got 2 full sets of the same loop. You see I have my loop region set, so it'll loop that portion. But I don't really want that there, so go back and redraw this over here. Now you're maybe ask yourself, like, well, why do you want to do this? Like, why do I need to build my own drum loops? When these music radar kits come with all these awesome beats that are labeled A and B and C and D, and they give me my tempo and that stuff, and that's true. And a lot of them are very good to use, and I'm not endorsing the samples I picked right here for this illustration, but this is a quick example. These kit loops are made with variations. Like this first one here, we give this our and they give you the tempo, which is great. So that's what the tempo was created at. And you can do the same thing when saving your own project file loops and stuff that you're going to create yourself. And if we listen to this one has a kick, this one doesn't. Now you see that these 2 loops are practically the exact same loop, with the only difference being that the kick has been removed. Reason being here is you can't, of course, engineer sound backwards. Now there's certain VSTs, I'm not going to name any names, that claim you can take the frequency, like the whole set of frequencies, isolate a particular patch of frequencies, and then reduce its levels to obliterate a sound from a mix. And technically speaking, you can do it. It's also like if you go and Google how to remove vocals from a song, it'll tell you to take a stereo mix, copy the layer, copy it, turn it to mono, invert the phase, and reduce the mids, and then all of a sudden you'll have a karaoke version of a track, and that technically works, even though it's not actually true, because all it does is mask the vocal, and you end up losing a lot of highs and mids from phase inversion, and that's not always good to do. So you don't want to do that. So by doing this process that we're talking about over here, you can build your own loops and not have to worry about it. So let's talk about saving these in a usable format. Before we do that, this gray thing here, let's talk about this real fast. The gray was a loop I originally used in FruityLoops, so I like the sound of the clap better. But the problem is that ACID doesn't always transpose things that are not perfectly acidized music files. And because of such, you get this nasty, muddy, time-stretched sound that FruityLoops and things like Ableton and FruityLoops and MPC controllers and stuff will adjust for. But ACID itself is sometimes not smart enough to do this. That's because that was recorded like at a very, very high speed. But we play this exact loop in FruityLoops, and you will not get that distortion. So let's go ahead and delete this because we're not going to use this anymore. So we got our little house loop here. And what we're going to do is go to File, and then Render as. Let's go to our desktop and save this. And we're going to say house loop 1. I'm going to put underscore acid so we know which one I'm going to do this with FruityLoops as well. And then we're going to go down here to WAV files, because most people, you want to save your stuff in WAVs, because that's what it ends up being easier to work with. And it's a little bit bigger file. I mean, you can always save it as, you could save it as an AIF or a FLAC if you wanted to. I don't, it's totally suggested, but whatever format you're comfortable with, whatever codec you're using, feel free to use whatever you want. But whenever making loops, we'll save them as WAV files. We're going to make sure we are only rendering the loop region, and the loop region is this blue section where we will click. You can click and drag up here, set your loop region, click the loop button, and then render that region. Now, the other thing is that if the loop region isn't turned on, you can still render the loop region, and it will not disregard that. Like it'll still render what's in that set. Other thing being, if you try to render a whole song or a whole section that your loop region's just one little tiny bit and it sounds weird, that'll probably be the problem, and you just need to go back and double check that and go back in and fix it. We want to save project markers with the media file. Do this. Don't ask why, just do it. Alright, and now we're going to save this. And now our loop has been created. Now we're going to go back up here. Collapse this. Go to our desktop, hit the refresh button, and where did you go? There it is, house loop. And what you'll see here is that it has rendered it at 8 beats at 120 beats per minute with no root note. Now I set none to my root note purposely. Not that it really matters for drums, because drums it doesn't matter. But if you're doing MIDI, you will probably want to set it to the key you're working in, or you can, if you want some weird effects, you can try changing the root notes. Anyway, 16-bit stereo sound at 44,100 hertz. So we'll go ahead and double click this. It will load up in here, and there we go. This right here is the culmination of these three things grouped together. Level dependent, that's all very well and done. Now you have just created your own loop on par with things like this. And it's very, very quick, very easy. Just for the sake of showing you how to do it, we're going to go back to FruityLoops. We're going to file, we're going to export this as a WAV file to our desktop, and we're going to take the same thing, move our mouse over, I'm going to put FLStudio version, hit save. You get to change your, well, don't worry about this because the bitrate doesn't matter. FruityLoops makes it a little bit easier to change your bit rates out, which is kind of nice, rather enjoyable. And change your resampling. There are many options to play with, but you really don't need to mess with anything except for save acidized information, which is like key and tempo. I'm going to change this to 128 real fast, just to match the other one. Oh yeah, and the other part too, make sure you're on pat. If you're making a loop up here, and you're not using the song thing here, like if you want to make like a whole like if I want to make like 2 bars worth, like we'd go to song and then do the render, or pat and do the render for pat if we're just doing the pattern. That can be also tricky, just like doing the loop region on Acid. You have to make sure you have the right thing selected whenever you're wanting to render it, otherwise it'll render the wrong section, and then you'll be like, what did that do wrong? And then it doesn't matter. The zipped loop package is also very, very nice because it will render, if you've got like 40 tracks on here that you've created, it will do those for you as well, all individually, and then you can go back through and build them in something like Acid if you wanted to. And that's pretty fun as well. Anyways, we're going to save this. We're going to go back to our desktop, rename it. It didn't save it. Come on. FL. I'm just going to put FL. Save. And here, wave 16-bit because the other one's 16-bit. Acidize. I don't have any mention track. And then we're going to start this. And it's done. We're ready for multi-threaded rendering. I'm going to open this here. Now you'll see that this doesn't have the bar section because it's from FruityLoops. So it's going to only go out to one section. And to combat that, you'll have to cut it down and then repaint just a little tiny bit. But you'll notice there you go. It's that simple. Making your own drum loops. FruityLoops makes it easy. It's like, say, like, oh, well, I want to do this without the hi-hat. You just click your little button here to the left, your little mute button. And then there you go. Now all of a sudden you've done the same thing. Of course, with Acid, we can do the same thing by hitting our. If we're say we're doing these 3 tracks up here, get our kick and our hat and our snare, or kick, clap, and snare, or hi-hat, and say like, oh, I don't want this, this symbol down here. And then you just hit your solo buttons and then do your rendering again. Same thing. That's all it takes. All you have to do is just either solo the track or mute the track, and it will do the same thing for you. The only it will also, if you are rendering effects on your stuff, it will render your effects when you do your rendering for your sections, so it's pretty nice, and FruityLoops will as well. Well, that's all I've really got for this. I do have something else I want to do about quantization and looping, about just making loops and chopping them off of a song, like how to get a good loop section. But I'm going to save that for another video because I think this is running long enough. So that's building your own drum loops for Acid and or FruityLoops and or whatever other program you're using. Same concepts apply to all programs. So I hope this was informative. Like, subscribe, comment on it for me, and let me know what you think. If you have any other further questions, please drop a comment, send me a message on my inbox, even though I don't suggest that because I don't hardly ever see them. But yeah, put that up there. I'm going to probably work on maybe a Facebook or something. I don't know. This year, being the whole new year, I'm going to try to ramp up some video production stuff. I'm taking 15 credit hours this semester. We'll see how it goes. So thanks, guys, and that's all.